This is a fascinating question to answer because I actually have empirical data to back up everything I'm about to say. The reason for that is because you'd be surprised how many studies have been done on how our brains learn, how we study things, how we develop skills. Now, just as a side note, everything I'm about to discuss doesn't really only apply to music. It actually applies to any skill you might want to learn. But for the purposes of this video, we are talking about music. So that having been said, let's get down to the numbers. The shortest amount of time that you want to practice for is around about 10 to 15 minutes. Reason for that is because you do something once or twice, the brain doesn't really pay attention. It doesn't really gather information from that because it kind of figures, well, this obviously isn't important. Do that same thing 30, 40, 50 times and your brain starts to go, well, maybe this is actually important. What's happening is you start to develop neural pathways. You're developing muscle memory. These are two separate things, by the way. The longest that you want to practice for is about 2 hours. And the reason being, your brain starts to get tired, right? You've spent 2 hours just gathering information where you need to have some time to pause, to process that information, which, as I understand, happens mostly when you're asleep. If you want to use a computing term, you could say your brain needs to defrag the information that you've gathered. Now, by the way, just because I've accidentally practiced 2 hours and 10 minutes, for example, doesn't now mean that I've wasted all of that time. That's not how it works. A better way to think of it would be, if I started practicing right now, at about the 10 to 15 mark, the effectiveness of my practice suddenly goes up. It skyrockets quite a bit, right? And it'll sit there for the next 2 hours, after which it will decline steeply because now I'm tired. Steeply. It'll decline greatly because I'm tired, right? Those 2 hours still matter, regardless of how long we practice for. Now, there's two more things that I want to note before my conclusion. The first thing is that everyone is different, right? So, for instance, my exact timing might actually be like 2.5 hours, whereas yours might be 90 minutes. This is why I said around 10 to 15 minutes and roughly 2 hours, because we're all different. Also, conditioning is a thing. It's kind of similar to when you go to the gym. The first time, you might only be able to do 10 push-ups, but give it a couple of months and all of a sudden you can do 100 push-ups. When you have a professional practicing 5 to 6 hours a day, that's not necessarily as unrealistic as you might think, considering what we've just learned. I've done it myself, not proud of it, but I've done it myself. I can recall my manager once booked me a gig with 1 week's notice, using a set list provided by the venue. I did not know the songs that I needed to play the next week, so I had to put in 5 to 6 hours of practice per week. I can tell you from experience, for me personally, the stuff that I learned, the songs that I learned in the first 2 hours, I definitely remembered better to the songs I started practicing after those 2 hours. So I can vouch for the fact that the 2 hour mark is pretty precise, at least to me. The other point to make is that regular consistency is far more important than the duration. In other words, what they found is that if I practice 20 minutes a day for 3 days, that's actually far more effective than if I do a single 2 hour practice. Even though 2 hours is longer than 3 times 20 minutes an hour, it's twice as long. It's still more effective to do 20 minutes a day for 3 days. That being said, what do I tell my students? Well, it's quite simple, really. I tell them I don't really care how long your practices last, so long as you're practicing every day for at least 10 minutes a day.